Hi, I'm Esperanza and this is Art from the Heart at St. Augustine's Church. And we're doing our session remotely because of the lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, today's topic is still on blooms, feathering. We're going to apply some gradients. The subject will still be musical instruments. And for this round, it would be one of the most popular ones, which is the violin. And we will do more of a stylized version of a violin using colors that we like. When I say colors that we like, I am going to use some colors. I would recommend them, but if you want to use other colors, you're free to do so, because we are not doing a realistic version of the violin. So let's start. We start by drawing two circles. These are more of ovals because we are viewing the circle at a certain angle. So we have one bigger oval and a smaller one, and then a narrow triangle. So let me do this with you. So to do this, we just need to draw a big oval, a small oval, and then a narrow triangle. And that is, this bit here would correspond to this one to this one, and the narrow triangle would be this bit where the strings are all on. Okay, again, what we're doing is a violin, and we have our guidelines. Again, these are just guidelines. So now we are going to do the actual shape, and we will use these guidelines when we do the actual shape. So I will add some more guidelines first, and that is by connecting two circles. So I've connected two circles or ovals in this case, and then I am going to add some shape here. So here, there's a shape like that, and another shape like that. A moment. So we're just adding like pointy bits over here. It's like, you know, the waves of water, where we do something like scallop shapes. Like this, for example. So if you're sketching water, you know, traditionally we learn to do it this way. So it's like scallops. So we are actually doing that and applying that to this side of the sketch. And then we're going to do it on the other side as well. And later on, we might be adjusting this. So this is not the end of it. We might be adjusting it depending on how we want our musical instrument to look. Like for example, for this part, it seems to be too thin. I know I've mentioned narrow, but compared to the actual violin, this part here is too narrow compared to the real one. So we might need to make that thicker. Of course, we need to taper this and remove the excess bit here of this long narrow triangle. So there's a lot of things that we still have to do. So for this one, we've done the basic bits. Okay, we'll proceed with this one. Again, as I've mentioned, I need to make this a little bit thicker, just slightly thicker. Oops, I think that's too much. Okay, and now I will start erasing the guidelines. And by that, I mean, we would need to do a lot more of erasing later on. And we would need to add a little, some more guidelines if necessary, Okay. So now we've erased most of the guidelines. We'll just try to do a better job on that. Try. Okay, and here, okay, I'm going to draw over this again. to make sure that I have the right shape and that I retain that correct shape. In this one, it's going to curve in. Should be lower over there because it's a certain tilt. Now we make this a little bit more 3D. So we add a straight line there going down. And then we follow this curve. And then we do the same thing in this area. We follow the curve. That's to make it more 3D. And then again, same thing here, but thinner, not as thick as this. So it's just a small bit there. Now this would be a little bit more interesting. So I would be doing that later on. We will start with this part of the violin first. So here, there is some sort of a holder for the strings. There are 4 strings. So we'll just draw something like that over there. And then here, it's like an S. And on the other side, the same, like an S. And then here, this is the bit that holds the other end of the string. Okay, now I need to turn this around so I can see if my work is proportional. I'm drawing this facing that way so that you can see how it is drawn, but I would need to check if I have drawn it properly. Okay, I would need to do some adjustments, like, for example, this one. It's basically the same thing. I just moved the lines a little bit to the left. So I just moved a little bit here towards my left. And then let me see if everything else is in order. And if you don't feel like drawing this in detail, like this, I mean, if you feel like putting less detail on it, that's also fine, because again, we're doing a stylized version of this musical instrument. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same. In this case, I am just drawing as much detail as I prefer to draw. Okay, now as I've mentioned, here's a more interesting piece, interesting bit. This end of my violin. Okay. Do you remember the guitar when we did the guitar the last time? It's similar to that, but this one has this swirl at the end. So we are trying to capture that swirl. So you see, that's what we have there. So we now have that swirl. And then we have this over here, and this over here. And here, remember when we did the guitar, there are certain parts which we needed to tune the guitar. It's the same thing here in the violin. So we use this to tune the violin. As the strings go in, they're connected to this certain objects here. So one, and then there's another one. Let me just do that. Okay. And then same with this side. Sorry, let me go like that. Again, you don't need to worry about this, because if you find it difficult following the detail, just don't put it. We're doing a stylized version of the violin, and what's important is that you enjoy painting it. You enjoy choosing the colors. You don't even have to draw the strings, or if you do, when you paint the string, it doesn't even have to be a continuous line. Again, it's stylized. It just has to be representative of the violin. I'm not going to do this part because I think we've already put so much detail on it, more than we actually normally should. So now I would like us to start painting. And for this one, I have a certain set of colors in mind. One would be violet, and of course blue and yellow ochre, with some black and burnt umber. Yes, that is just water. You can do the same thing by just dropping water on the palette. I just use a spray to make it more convenient for me. However, in some applications, the spray can be used as well. But for now, we're not using it to do any particular effect. What we are just doing is just adding water to our palette. So don't worry, it's nothing fancy. We just mix the colors. We have yellow, oh, violet. I need violet. Yeah, I think that's it. I can put my colors back in the box, set it aside. Now I need to add more water to some of the wells, like this blue one, yellow one, yellow ochre, black, and of course the violet one. Okay, now we have to decide which part of the violin will be purple, would be violet, which part would be blue. Okay, I suggest that we keep this part, the base, in yellow ochre, and then we put darker colors here and here, and also maybe the background, we can make the background violet, maybe this dark blue, this yellow ochre. We can put burnt umber for some shadows or dimensions, and then black would be for the details. Again, this is a stylized piece, so we don't have to put so much details. It would depend on how we want it to appear, and it doesn't have to be a realistic piece. So I am now going to just put a base layer of yellow ochre, because that's what I want the violin to be. I want it to be in yellow ochre. Yes, and I'm painting wet on dry, so that it's easier for it to dry. And it would actually be better if we paint wet on wet, because the gradients, the transition of colors will be smoother. But again, our consideration for this session is the drying. So it has to dry faster than, it has to dry fast. That is it. We don't have the time to wait for it. However, if you're doing it by yourself, you can do wet on wet. and just do one layer at a time. And then you can go back to the video at any time you want to, and then continue from there. So I now have yellow ochre. I just rinsed my brush. I am now brushing the rest of the art piece with just water. So the water will help spread the yellow ochre throughout the page. So if we paint this later on, this will be, if we paint it with blue, this will be kind of greenish. So maybe we should lift some of it, not to be too greenish. Yes. Okay. Then I'm gonna paint it with a little water so that the color spread evenly. Otherwise, we're going to see the marks from the kitchen towel, so it's going to have its own design. But if that's your intention, that's fine. Again, it depends on what you want to achieve for the particular art piece. So now we just have to let it dry, and once it's dry, we will go on and paint. Okay, it has now dried a little bit. It's still slightly wet, but it's a good time for us to paint our subject so that the paint can still spread. But most of the color would be held in a certain spot. So now we just paint the background first with this violet watercolor paint. And as you can see, the violet actually changes its particular hue and color as well. Because here it's more of the real violet, because we lifted most of the yellow ochre. And here it turns into a more yellowish, brownish one. See, that's why I told you earlier that you don't have to worry about the details. Okay. You can actually paint the parts of our violin. Again, this is a stylized piece, so you don't have to worry that the paint is not exactly at a certain place. What we are trying to express here is the artistry, the creativity, and of course, it has to still look like a violin, even if it's not a realistic violin. It should be representative of a violin. Okay, now I am going to paint some blue, but I'm going to add a little black with that to make it a little bit darker. I want it to be darker. Okay, and it is going to spread because some parts are still wet. So I'm okay with that. Again, the line doesn't have to be straight, not necessarily straight. It depends on what you want to achieve. Yes, this is more concentrated. This is thicker. So now we have that part of the violin. I think just to give it some balance, we should have some blue areas here in the background as well. And just let the colors mix. Again, we're still in feathering and backwash. As you can see, there's some backwash here, which gives it that nice effect, that transition. And in some areas, the transition is very smooth. The gradient is very smooth. So it depends on what we want to achieve. So now I am going to use some burnt umber to give our violin some dimension. So this part would be darker. Yeah, I will assume that I have light coming from this area. So that part would be darker. So would that part and that part as well. And later on, if you want it to be even darker, we can paint black over it. Okay, and then here it should be a little bit darker. Again, not too much pressure because it's not supposed to look like a real violin. It's stylized. And in this particular piece, the stylization is not more of an outline. It's more of the spread of the color. So what we're doing in this style is just showing the creation of the art piece by colors that are spreading into each other. Okay, more of that. I will just turn it a little bit so I can see what's going on. Okay, that looks good. That looks very good actually. Let me just paint this bit. Let me see what else we can do. Yeah, maybe we can add some more colors. Let's add some red to this just for some excitement and maybe a little bit more orange. So I'm just to make it more colorful. As I said, it's about the spread of colors. This art piece is all about the spread of colors, putting colors together to create that particular piece. Yes, this is similar to one of the guitars that we painted. Yes, similar, but not exactly the same. And then at this point, we would need to wait for it to dry. Okay, I would like to spread this part a little bit because I find it too concentrated. And that concentration of paint deforms the shape of our violin. So here, we're almost finished. We just need to put the details. We can actually start putting the details, but in some area later on, we would need to wait for it. Yes, we need to wait for it to dry for some areas because some areas would require, like the strings, would require the paint to be in a straight line. So for that, we would need to wait a little bit, make sure that the paint we previously applied is dry. There we go. Okay. We're looking good. We're looking good. And then, yeah, here we have this, that. And we actually cannot see most of the details. So we continue to paint black pigment on our art piece. So here we have this bit. Again, if the color spreads, that's all right, because that is actually our intention, to allow it to spread and show feathering and backwashing. And here, okay, I want to make sure you see this part. Amazing. So we now have this bit. I'm just gonna darken this bit. So I think it's gonna make it look better. And that's looking better in my eyes because it's my art piece. And your art piece should look good in your eyes as well. Remember, you are the artist. Okay, wow, I like it. I do like it. I like the effect of the black paint spreading. And then here we have that. Oh, beautiful. I'm just gonna turn it a bit to make it easier for me. And for this part, I'm just going to paint it. Yeah, I'm now actually painting the outline, which I mentioned earlier I didn't do, but I wouldn't do. But what I'm saying is that I'm not painting it like it's a solid piece. I'm painting it differently to let the paint spread. Okay, it's not gonna be like how we paint strings, because the strings I would really want to paint when the whole thing is dry, because that part of the art piece I don't wanna spread. What else could we do with this art piece? I do love it. I love the colors in particular. Maybe here. Maybe here. Just a little bit darker. Okay. And at this point, I think this part is dried up too much. So I'm just gonna add water to help the colors. Oops. To help the colors mix better. Yes, I think that would be great. Oh, fantastic. Yes, I'm adding a little bit of orange to that side, just to give it some balance. Again, you can use any color you want. We are not doing a realistic painting. It's more of a stylized one, where the style is letting the color mix. Yes, or we can use some patterns. If you prefer to use other patterns like lines, or it can be a color pattern. So it depends on what you wanna do. I think this it should be darker. Maybe I'll use a more dark brown, or maybe blue. And maybe add more blue in this area as well. And I have to do it while the paint is wet to allow it to mix freely. Okay, at this point, let's see if we're ready. Yeah, I think the strings are ready. Though some of it will not have the effect I would like it to have, but this bit would have it. This one would also have it. One moment. There we go. Let me just turn it around because I would like to see how it actually looks, because it's different from the angle I'm looking at this. Like for example, this bit, if I'm looking at it from where I'm painting, I don't really see this detail missing. However, if I turn it around and let the art piece face me, yes, I do see that there was something missing there. I do see that I need to add more black pigment here to create the balance. What else do I see? Yes, need a little more there. Oh, and here as well. Yes. So now I have my violin, and we have shown a lot of feathering, backwash, gradients, and lots of colors as well. So now we just have to let it dry, and our art piece is ready. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and see you next time. Bye bye.